For one-point perspective, there is a reason that comparing angles and ratios is so important. We're going to see if you can figure out why at the end of this presentation. The first thing you need to know about perspective is that there are some common things no matter what kind of perspective you're drawing. Items drawn in perspective will have a vanishing point, or where the object seems to disappear. Additionally, there are three main types of line when you're drawing architectural drawings like what we're going to do for the hallway drawing or for a building. Those line types are vertical, horizontal, and diagonal. Any line that is diagonal should be going to a vanishing point. Another thing to be aware of is measuring in a drawing. We talked about this briefly with the cylinder drawing, but you should be aware that you can take one object and use that object to make the entire drawing proportional. Here, the person is measuring the head of a mountain lion and comparing it to the rest of the body of the mountain lion, so it's completely in proportion. The same thing can be done for a classroom or hallway. Here I have measured the smartboard in the room and compared that length to how wide the classroom is. There are 5 smartboard lengths in the wall above the smartboard in this image. When you begin your thumbnails, you can take an image with your phone and print the image with Photoshop or look through a viewfinder to practice your composition. Remember, composition is how the page is arranged. After you have practiced the composition in a thumbnail, start blocking in the drawing. When you start blocking in or drawing the initial outlines of your drawing on the larger good paper, use a number 2 pencil. It's sometimes easier to do this after drawing what looks like a math graph very lightly in your printed photo and on your paper. We will refer to these sections as quadrants, just like in math. Dividing the page in half both directions will allow you to focus on one square at a time, creating more accurate drawings. Make sure you compare the diagonal lines to the analog clock face as well. This will keep the drawing looking more proportional. To create a one-point perspective drawing, start by placing the wall at the end of the hallway in the correct quadrant you created on your paper. Use a ruler to figure out where the vanishing point is by using the ceiling and floor lines from one side of the drawing. The more correct the angle of those lines are to where they start on the edge of the page, the more proportional the drawing will end up when you're finished. Once you have found the vanishing point, use that point to make the ceiling and floor lines on the other wall. Next, think about the ratios or distance between items on the right wall of the drawing. How far down the wall is the colored strip that is above the lockers? How far from the top of the lockers is that line? Make a small mark on the right vertical side of the wall at the end of the hallway to show how tall each item is on the right wall. Then use the vanishing point to create diagonal lines from the right side of the back wall all the way to the right side or the right edge of the paper. Do this for each object. Once you have done that, figure out how far the first doorway is from the end of the hallway on the right side. You will again have to estimate how far those vertical lines are from the right edge of the paper. In this photo, it looks like that doorway is about 1/4 of the way from the back wall to the edge of the paper. You have to continue looking at the photo you took and compare the ratio on the photo to the paper you are drawing on to keep all the image in correct proportion. The closer you are to correctly measuring angles, the more realistic your drawing will look when it's finished. This is why it's important to continue using the analog clock face and comparing diagonal lines to that clock face as you're drawing. A good tip to remember is that if a line is diagonal, it goes to a vanishing point. Any other line in the one-point perspective should be similar to the lines that make up the wall that is at the end of the hallway. That wall is a rectangle and should have vertical and horizontal lines. Now we're back to that initial essential question. Why is comparing ratios and angles so important in perspective drawing? If you continue to measure carefully and represent those measurements accurately on the page, your drawing should look more proportional and realistic.